wherever you are. We really want to have thousands of people here this year so that we can serve them lunch and health services and do the kids' activities and all the things that us and KM Concessions do as partners on this event. So please pass these out liberally and get as many people here as possible. And that's it, besides what I wrote down there. So.
Thank you. The rest of our updates are in your packet. I believe NDCC and the authority will do their updates at their place on the agenda.
And see, Jocelyn couldn't attend
And
tonight.
Jocelyn couldn't attend tonight. And I don't think anyone's here from the Museum of Nature and Science.
Or History Colorado.
Or History Colorado. Okay. Authority board member update. John, you have anything?
No, I don't. We don't have anything because we're going to meet next week.
Oh, that's right. We're a week early.
Yeah, you're a week early.
That's right. We are a week
Get it
early.
next month.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
NDCC, you're up.
Thank you for asking. Is it on?
It's on.
Hey Jessica, let me know if you want me, when you get to the map part, if you want me to turn the lights off so it's easier
Yeah, I
for
think,
people to see.
can we dim it?
Yeah, I don't know if dimming works.
Or just turn it on? Is it on now? Yes.
Yeah, we hear you.
We hear you.
I've never seen this stem. Yeah, this I have to grow my beard out.
Ooh, that's awesome. That's it. That's
It's a Halloween noise.
I'm kidding.
You know, I have a, if we're going to let one non-member sit at the table, I'd like to invite everybody to sit at the table.
Who's the non-member? Oh,
We have
yeah,
room.
I
sure.
mean, if we're going to
Yeah, if you're sitting
We have
back there,
room.
just come to the
Why
table.
don't you guys
We have plenty of room.
Yeah, that's
So we
right.
can see what we're going to present.
you know, just to relax the protocol, if we're going to.
That was a very good thought, AE. Thank you.
Thank you.
Especially on a night when
I don't know. Which way to
And we'll get out of here. Sorry.
that's what I'm hoping.
I'm gonna move it along.
A little bit.
Waiting.
Because I have to go home and pack. I have to catch a plane in the morning, so I need to pack
Where are
to
you going?
Atlanta.
Oh, that's fine.
It's homecoming.
Oh,
and
Morehouse.
I have a cousin.
So wanted to come here today and share some updates about last September, we launched our initiative called Navigate North Denver to help inform the neighborhoods and people in North Denver about all the construction that's going on. So you better get around your neighborhoods, get to businesses.
Can't hear you, sorry.
Still, okay. Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, that's way better. So last September, we launched our Navigate North Denver initiative to help inform the public about the construction activities going around town so that people could get to work, get to school, get around their neighborhoods a little bit easier. And 2 weeks ago, we launched an updated version of that website. So the website is called navigatenorthdenver.com. And when you get to it, it looks a little something like this. We have some tips and tricks on how to use the map from what we've learned over the last year. We have links to partnering agencies so you can see, you can find more from Central 70, the big one on the freeway. And we post major closures on here. But the real update is when you click on this button that says Explore the Map. Or Wi-Fi. It's taking a second to load. It shows you all the closures that are going on downtown and all the streets, the sidewalks, the bike lanes, and the parking lanes in town. This map is also showing some of the upcoming projects, but for simplicity, I'm going to turn those off. So you can see there's a lot going on the Denver streets up in North Denver. So the boundary that you see, this is Federal Boulevard. We go down to Colfax. Our east boundary is Ivy Street, and the north is 52nd, close to the Adams County boundary. So we show full closures. When you hover, it shows you what's closed, what type of closure it is, the start date and the end date. Some of these are permanent closures, so they're going to be closed for a long time. Some show just the type sidewalk closure or parking lane closure. And you can turn other features on, like hospitals, schools, by clicking on the left side of the map to turn those on, where it allows you to click on it and get more information about what's there. There's a little bit of a delay, I apologize. But this is desktop friendly. This is also mobile friendly, so you can use it on your phone while you're traveling around. But as you can see, you can get other information about schools. We also show businesses in the area, and then also parks and recreation centers, public buildings, and emergency or hospitals in the area. So how many people have used the old map that was up for the last year? Has anybody been to the website and used that? A few people. We had over 32,000 users over the last year, so we're averaging about 700 to 1,000 people a week are accessing this map to plan their routes around town. That includes emergency responders, so our police, our fire, EMTs as well. The new tool the new functionality we've added is the turn-by-turn directions. So I know a lot of you live in this area, but if you're trying to help people get to something in this area, we can give them turn-by-turn directions around the closures. So we're up in here. We're gonna start there and head somewhere. I think the Nuggets play tonight, or somewhere over here. So by clicking navigate, it will give you a route around town. And the thing that this highlights is that we try to help people use the freeways because we want them out of the trucks, out of the neighborhoods. And if you need more detail, you can click here to get the different stops. And by clicking on those, it'll zoom it in. But we've found that a lot of businesses are sharing this tool to help people get around that are frustrated or can't find them. So just helping people know that the tool exists has been really helpful for the community. I did want to point out one more thing. Something's missing. So all of this information is also updated every 24 hours. So it's updated, and then it informs your Waze, your Google Maps, your Apple Maps. They're using our tool to update theirs. So if it's first thing in the morning, you might want to use our map to plan, and then later in the day, you'll see these closures start showing up on the ones on your phone as you're driving around town. So that's just a quick overview, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Jessica, did you talk how this gets updated through the permit?
Through the permits.
Yeah.
So when contractors, when they submit to close a road or a sidewalk, once it's approved and they pay for their permit, then it shows up on the map. So again, every 24 hours, this gets updated automatically from the city systems.
The other, I don't know if you can pull it over. The other cool tool on the side of this, on the left, is you can click to where you are and where you're going, and it'll map you the route that you need to go, and it'll give you step-by-step directions, kind of like, was it MapQuest?
Yeah, like MapQuest back in the day.
And like Jessica said, you can do it first thing in the morning, as things are getting updated, is a great way to be able to get through the construction. And then mention the C70 connection in November.
Oh, so the Central 70, we're showing most of their closures. We'll be able to show their closures in real time in the middle of November. We're working through some technical issues with their information, but we will be plugged into their information as well, so you'll know what they're closing on our Denver streets. So for the businesses in the room, I encourage you, please check out if your business shows up on the map. If it's not, our email is on the website. We'll be happy to work with you to make sure that that gets loaded. That's going to be our big effort over the next few months to make sure that we can get all of those listed on here, so. There's just a few. I know there's more.
Jessica, is there anything that indicates traffic, how long it's going to take you to get where it is or how to get around this map?
So this will estimate a time based on just the length of the route, but it does not take into consideration live traffic. So if there's an accident, we just don't have that data in here yet. But that's something on our list to investigate and see if we can get it in more real time.
With the astronomical amount of work that's being done here in the Denver area right now, is there any strategy on where some of the work that's taking place? So in other words, I guess my point is, if they're pulling permits, is there somebody that looks at an overall map and within like a 3-block area, they don't shut down certain pieces or kind of work together in reference to when some of the work can start, so it's not so impactful? Is there a strategy?
To try to minimize congestion and just the sheer amount of construction in an area. So we've been working with Denver's right-of-way services to update their process a little bit. Most construction is approved on a first come, first served basis. So the first contractor to get their permit in is generally going to get approved, and then they'll have to look at what they're closing before they'll allow anything else. So we're working with them to revise their rules and regulations a little bit to spread it out. But I know as a city as a whole, yes, they look at that, but in terms of development, I think that's up to developers where they want to close things. It's just up to the city if they approve it or not, and they're working through that. So it's definitely something we know we're trying to improve overall.
So what you're saying is overall, then there's no one that sits down and looks at all this and says, say on York, we're going to have 3 or 4 different projects on York rather than trying to space those in so that people can move throughout the city better?
No, there are engineers that have different areas that they look at that before they let them go to construction. But again, those are city projects that they phase, and then the development kind of feeds into that. But there is somebody that looks, there are different areas in the city that are broken out, and somebody's responsible to look at that.
Are you talking about, is this all within Public Works?
So this is Public Works. We show Denver Water, we show Excel utility work, development work. But you're talking about who's reviewing it within Public Works?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know what Vern's trying to get at. Let me just take an example,
Yeah.
just because I kind of cursed at 3 people today as I was going. I couldn't get on 17th Avenue from Denver Union Station to out of downtown because there was a bunch of blockage, right, and a couple of things. And it was really hard to figure out how do you go next because all the other streets also had lanes closed. So I know it's a combination of public and private, but is that all Public Works? I don't know. Brad, you want to help out here?
My understanding.
Is that on?
It is Public Works and it's right away. And they, in terms of the requests for street closures, parking lane closures, sidewalk closures, it is for first come, first serve. And then if they determine, looking at this block and this block and this block that are next to them, they have 3 requests, they will force the developers and contractors to sequence those so that, I mean, I'm not saying it isn't still a pain in the backside,
Right.
It is, but to make sure it's not impossible to get through to a place. In the private development is the same way, it works the same way, and they coordinate it with the public sector development. If Public Works is doing a sewer line replacement or Excel's running new conduit or whatever it is, they do coordinate that. One of the other issues, though, I think that could definitely use some improvement is they may have a developer that comes in and replaces a section of street because they've done a project and they're replacing curb and sidewalk and pavement along a lane. And then you have this beautiful new street down, and then 2 months later, Excel comes in and digs it up because, they didn't do it when the road was tore up. And that is a system and a conversation that's going on right now. I'm not aware that it's figured out, but they are working on a system so that they avoid that as much as possible. So they're not tearing up stuff they just put down that was shiny and new.
Any other questions? So we found out today that we're getting this wall in the state. Will that show up on the map?
I think it depends on if it's within those 4 boundaries.
Okay, just checking.
I don't think it's on the bond program list of projects though, so.
That makes the dredge report in red.
But please, we're looking for feedback and comments from users, so use it on your phone, on your computer, and let us know, because we're looking to evolve, and as we work through the kinks on the processes with reviewing permits and whatnot, and then showing the data, we're hoping that this will go citywide eventually. So we're looking for feedback if you guys have any. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We'll have the NWC Authority report from its CEO, Mr. Brad Buchanan.
Thank you. So I was here a while back talking about our strategic implementation plan, and specifically the programming piece of it that is really the heart of that plan. And many of you were involved with the events we had this summer around the focus areas. So thank you all for your time and attention to that process. Next week, after the board meeting, we'll be posting all that information. It's not new to you. It was Grace Hanover and Matt Berry have been here and presented it, and for those of you who have been at the events, you've seen it too. But we will be posting those programs online on the nationalwestern.center.com website. What I do want to talk about is kind of the what's next piece of it. So some of those ideas will be kicking off in 2020, and that's sort of an open call for interest on these program ideas that we developed over the summer, and so we'll be posting, and we believe on the website, but also looking for other ways to communicate this, and that's what we're working on right now, is these programs and the ideas and the experiences and the events to see who else. We know who showed up and submitted the ideas, and we know who signed up and said, hey, I'm interested in working on something like this, but we'll be able to take all comers on any of these ideas as they start to get actuated here in 2020. Some of these events are actual physical events that'll be either on campus or off campus, but a lot of them are virtual events. We're talking about really trying to stand up the National Western Center brand, conversation about a podcast in 2020, a YouTube channel, and getting some virtual information expertise out there so we can start to develop the National Western Center content and brand outside of Denver and Colorado as well. So more to come about that, but the strategic implementation plan will be posted next week right after the board meeting, which is on Thursday, the 31st, Halloween Day. End of my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Brad? Okay, seeing none. Oh, is there one? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the NWC campus. Is Tychus here, or?
No, Brad's going to do it.
Oh,
Dobson.
Brad.
I'm here.
Oh,
Oh,
are you going up there? This might be a record meeting, you guys.
I'm hoping I get some questions so we can at least use the full.
But we had one more presentation that bailed out on us, so.
Good evening, Brad Dodson, Deputy Director for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. Here to give you a construction update. I have a couple slides here that we are just part of our normal deck that I'll click through for reference. After 3 years of really active procurement, we are starting to wind down We're at our last procurement, the CMGC for the livestock center, which is the last building that gets
Hey, you too.
constructed as part
So
of the phase 1-2 capital build. And we are expecting the RFQ for that CMGC. It's on schedule to go out the next few weeks. So look for that. Our site plan hasn't changed, but we keep this up here for reference. I want to talk a little bit about a construction update. There's two items that are highlighted on here. Le Bouton Noir. If you've driven up National Western Drive, you've seen that demolition happening. We'll show you some pictures here in a second. And then Race Court, right in front of the Newco field office. There's a closure. It's currently permitted through Friday. We are hoping for good weather to allow that work to finish up. I know it's snowing outside, so hopefully it doesn't impact that. I want to look at a couple construction pictures. Here is where Le Bouton was.
Oh my God.
It is, that building, if you recall, was 500,000 square feet. There you go, thank you. That building was 500,000 square feet. It's been coming down over the last few weeks at 7,000 square feet per day. So active demolition, and this was left of that building. Here's more of that activity from a different angle. You see the Armor Admin building, which had been almost hidden and oversized by this large Le Bouton. You see it now front and center. Here's a picture of a rail car. You may have seen this on the western side of National Western Drive. So it has been moved. It was moved just last week, I believe, and it's being preserved. And who's had a chance to drive up Brighton Boulevard? So you've seen that has been completed. It looks great. It is open, and there still is construction going on the CDOT portion down near Central 70, but the part that was done as part of this project has been completed and is open. Does anyone know? I don't know if you can see the words on this. What this picture is? These are railroad ties. So since right around the time that we were last together, the city had signed a settlement agreement with Denver Rock Island Railroad that relocates that rail line into the central corridor within the campus. It removes 14 unprotected at-grade crossings and consolidates that into a central corridor. And we've been active at work at building the new rail corridor. We have a picture of that here in a second. But these are the new railroad ties that have been delivered and are ready to be installed. So here you see that new rail corridor, and they're prepping for those railroad ties and for the track. And then last, one update on the triangle I want to provide. Some of you may have heard Chris Pacheco was recently named by the mayor as the leader of the performance-based infrastructure office. So he takes the role that Emily Halper been playing and serves in a dual role within the mayor's office, projects office. And so Chris will be leading the effort on the triangle. He's been quickly getting up to speed over the last couple weeks. He asked me to say hello to everyone. He's been here before, but he's going to come back next month and reintroduce himself and talk more about the process that the team's been going on and some initial observations and thoughts that he has and wants to hear your thoughts as well. So we'll have him joining us here next month. And as always, please keep in touch with us and be on the lookout for our text updates that are shown here. And that is our quick update. Would love to entertain any questions that you have.
Brad, can you go back to the schedule on the triangle, please?
Sure. So we are still tracking for the first draft of that RFP sometime later this fall. Otherwise, the schedule, we remain on track.
Mickey has, yeah, no, go.
I have a few questions. One, looking at all the maps, I can never figure out where the entry is or is going to be. It's really confusing whether it's where it is now, whether it's going to be off Washington, and somehow some designation that maybe some monument so people can say, this is kind of where you're going to be going into the National Western. Would be extremely helpful.
Sure. So in the future, once the campus is complete, or let's talk about phase 1 and 2 specifically, you'll have multiple options. So you can enter in from the north or from the south and have 2 connections over to Washington Street. With the full build out of the campus that comes with future phases, you will also have access from Brighton and be able to go all the way from Brighton and connect over to Washington Street.
Well, I think on the maps that you're presenting now, it would be extremely helpful to be able to say, this is where an entry is, this is where an entry is. I mean, now you look at it and say, where would I go into this place? I know where the Coliseum is now.
Right.
I know where I park, but I have no idea where I'll be in the future. And just being able to see
Being able to see that? Okay.
on maps would be extremely helpful.
Okay, that's good feedback. We can provide that.
And I guess I have a couple of other concerns. One is, how are we going to handle the situation when I-70 is under construction in this area and Washington is likewise under construction? And then the CSU building is allegedly going to be open. I'm not sure how anyone's going to get into that campus and what the plans are for that interim period.
It's a great question. We have a group that's our continuous operations working group where we work with our partners and we talk specifically about that, about what happens, how do we all coordinate together, and how do we preserve that access. It is certainly important during construction, as different buildings come online at different times, that we preserve access for emergency vehicles as well as to visitors to the campus. And that's something that we work with our partners consistently on. It's an important value for the campus and for the partners as a whole, not only for day-to-day operations, but more specifically for every January we welcome 800,000 visitors to an active construction site. It's very important that we think about that in everything that we do.
I have a third question. Interested in what's happening to the animal waste. I mean, we have these gigantic yards, and there isn't a clear plan as to where that animal waste, how it's being disposed of, how it's flowing. At least one illustration I saw had that waste kind of accumulating near the front entry off of 51st. Is that true, or what is the situation with animal waste?
I don't know if there has been a determination of where that might be located, and Brad Buchanan, please jump in here if you have any ideas on that. It is something that we have been looking at, in particular about how that affects water runoff. We've been working with Metro Wastewater to really understand that, to make sure that it's compliant with their system and that we are following applicable laws and regulations regarding that.
Or is there any possibility of basically a reuse of that animal waste?
I know that's something that Metro Wastewater has looked at. Marcy, do you have more on that?
There is, some of the existing waste or the current waste that is on campus right now is, they're reaching out to some of the contractors are reaching out to different sources for composting. So they're using that for some composting efforts right now. You're going to see a lot of different piles on the site where we have crushed concrete, we have crushed asphalt, we have clean dirt that we've got from C-70. So there are a lot of different piles, the same with some of the wood shavings and things that the stock show has. And so right now the piles are in certain places, they're being divvied up, some concrete or crushed concrete being used for concurrent operations, some being sent to C-70, working on some of the composting of the existing animal waste. And then we can also bring back to another meeting, there's a much larger discussion about waste and piles and stuff when the campus is fully built out, on how that is all handled. Right now it's being handled within the current operations.
Okay, well, the one sketch I saw had it gathering in the 51st Street entrance in a big pond, which didn't seem like a very good entryway.
No, I don't think we put waste in a pond.
No, I'm not sure what exhibit that's referring to.
But that's,
I'll certainly will ask.
yeah.
Then a couple of other things. One, as we're building these buildings, I'm trying to understand kind of a sequence. I mean, one of the difficulties I have now in coming to the stock show is I don't know quite where to go. One place there's horses, one place there's cows, another place there's sheep, another place there's sheep shearing. And somehow, if it were put together in a way so that you could do a day excursion and see what's happening with cows or what's happening with sheep or something. Right now, it just is, to me, one conglomeration, which is not easy to basically get people to understand. And it seems like it would be appropriate to figure out, and I guess the buildings are really set, but at least try to get a logical sequencing of how one would walk, which brings me to the next question. I still haven't seen any good system of mobility. This is a very, very big campus, and everybody's saying, well, we'll come up with some vehicle or something mobile, and part of it is finding that vehicle, and the other part is, again, having sequences and really encouraging people in classrooms to come 3 or 4 times. I mean, if you're going to go to the rodeo and try to get through the National Western, it's virtually impossible, and especially when it's not clear where the specific areas are. So somehow thinking of it beforehand as opposed to finishing the complex and then saying, well, there's a map, and you can figure it out from the map.
So probably I am the only one that can answer that, Mickey, because I'm the CEO of the National Western Stock Show. And so yes, obviously we talk about this every day. In fact, today we talked about how we're going to move people from the extreme north end of the yards all the way over to the rodeo arena, which is at the Coliseum, which is now, I don't know, 3 miles away. So we're going to have golf carts that we're renting that are going to be put in the yards, so we can transport people that far distance right now, because it is going to be a long way. But to answer your future, when the triangle comes in, we have what in our minds would be exactly perfect for the new arena, to provide a front door for this complex as well as the expo hall. The developer is going to have to sit with us and the authority and others and brainstorm that. But from Stock Show's standpoint, if that new arena is up there by the commuter rail line drop-off and the new expo hall is attached to it, we got a nice little area where you can now walk from there all the way down into the yards and into the livestock center and the equestrian center very easily, versus today, you are miles away from the rodeo arena today. So we have to fix that. We're 100% with you, and Stock Show is trying to fix that, but we are at the disadvantage of having the developer also be at the table, because we don't have enough money to build it. So the developer is going to dictate some of that, and I'm going to try to guide the developer. Brad Buchanan's going to try to guide the developer and others that are part of this whole campus. But we assure you we know what you're saying, because we want ease of movement and all the things that you want. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Paul.
Any other questions for Brad? AP.
I actually just kind of want to offer an endorsement of Chris Pacheco. Now, I don't know if there's only one Chris Pacheco. There's so many Brads. There may be several. But Chris Pacheco.
I believe there's only one.
Okay, good. Chris Pacheco has been involved in the neighborhoods out here for many years, and I just hope people will take the opportunity seriously. I myself am very happy about his further engagement. He's a very authentic presence, and he's got in my experience, he's got a real receptivity to hearing out neighborhood constituents around communications and problem solving, and he's a real, I call him an implementer. He's a real implementer. I think he comes out of Public Works originally,
originally for Public Works,
Yeah.
but he served as the deputy director for NWC under Tim Sandos for a number of years.
Yeah, and beyond that, I'm very pleased that he's going to be in this position because I think that, and I'm saying this because I want to encourage people to engage with him as somebody that is interested. He's one of the authentic communication presences, despite difficulties, and he is, in my experience, a person who will empathetically hear what's going on the ground level, and he really is a builder type person too. So he's very knowledgeable and able to even explain some of the technicalities and things like that with infrastructure coordination and that. So I think that's great, and I would just encourage people to really take the opportunity to have conversations with him and going forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Brad?
Yep.
John Seppian.
Yes. I have a couple. Please don't be offended, but a lot of people think that I'm very sensitive about some things. I have a deep respect for our history, especially the ethnic cultural history of our neighborhoods. I don't have a degree, but I like some things that some people say refer to as art. Many decades ago, the fancy name Le Mouton, it was the old sheep barn when I worked there, and there's nothing nastier and stickier than sheep dung, cleaning it out. That is part of our culture. That sheep barn and that sheep bridge, the crossing over, was two things. It was economic energy on this side from the old Denver Union stockyards. The other side, for people like myself, it was an equal opportunity as a job. We, at one time, slaughtered about 3,500 lambs a day on a 10-hour shift. And that went on for like 3 months at the height of the season. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that we should somehow make a notation. And like I say, I'm not a very artsy person, but that's part of our culture. And that should be infused in the art of the overall program here. The old sheep barn, I don't know if you saved the cornerstone on that or not, or was it demolished when it was built? But somehow there should be some acknowledgement of what was there and why it was there and what it did on the other side of the river. Not only sheep, cattle, swine, whatever across that bridge. And it was an economic opportunity for a lot of us in Groveville that lived there at that time and worked in the slaughterhouses. So there should be some acknowledgement of that era at that location in the overall art. And I'll leave up to the people that are more knowledgeable about art than I am. We need to acknowledge the railroad because that was also an integral part of this entire neighborhood, the industrial opportunity it provided to people. So and I'm sure you'll have a mechanical spike machine when you lay the rails, but you ought to have some celebration, and Brad should knock in the first spike on the new line when it's
That's a great idea.
when it started with a hammer, not on the machine like we did in the old days. But I bring that up because we have an obligation. You know, Mickey spoke to this several times of what happened in this area in the past. And there were a lot of abuses, no doubt about it. But it's time to get beyond that and acknowledge what happened, make tribute to that time and era, and move on with the great opportunity that we have in front of us. This National Western Center, that's why we're here, to make this happen. So if you acknowledge them things and make note of it, make sure that that's part of the cultural arts effort out of the National Western Center. Brad?
Thank you, John. So there's a wonderful comment, and we share. I think all of the partners share the values that you highlighted, and that's why we have on the program an historical resources manager that's full time on the program that is researching and is talking with folks to really capture all of the stories that you mentioned. And I'd make a plug here that John and others, if you have stories about the history of this campus that you think that should be known and should be documented and celebrated on the future of the campus, I would love to connect you with Sean Snow. He's our historical resources manager. But specifically to your question about Le Mouton Noir and what that building means and how it points to the long history of this site, yes, we completely agree, and we are including a plaque that will celebrate and tell that story. The sheet bridge itself, we are seeking to preserve. And I'll tell you, that's something that I think is really important. I think I shared this with Vern. As I first learned about the history of Globeville by asking, hey, tell me about this bridge. What is this? How was this used? And I learned so much about history, and it does point to the past. It points to the rich history of this campus, and those stories need to be captured and retold. And we completely agree with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for, go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Oh, one more question. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I just had a couple questions on like air quality and air pollution. Seeing all those pictures from the demolition, I would assume there's lots of dust, and then talking about animal waste, that's also like an air quality concern. And GES GES has higher rates of childhood asthma because of their proximity to I-70. And that just got me thinking, like with the demolition and with issues of where we're putting animal waste, what are you guys doing to kind of mitigate air pollution?
It's a great question. We didn't have this picture up. You may have seen it online on the National Western Center Facebook page. But as we do demolition, and we did this with Le Mouton, there was a water truck out there, and there were folks with hoses that were watering down constantly. So to mitigate exactly what you bring up, make sure that we aren't creating dust that isn't spreading, that we are constantly hosing down, watering down these buildings as they are being demolished. That's a great point. Marcy, do you have something to add to that?
So we also follow DDPHE and CDPHE standards.
Marcy, can you use the mic so it gets on?
We also follow CDPHE and DDPHE standards for construction and for demolition specifically. And like Brad said, a lot of the keeping the dust down has to do with keeping things wet. So not only are they wetting as they're doing that demolition, but any of those piles that you see around the site, those are also intermittently being wet down to make sure they are not emitting any dust. And we do have standards that we have to keep below. The other thing is we talked a lot about crushing concrete and crushing asphalt. So we have specialized crushers that we are using, and the crushers, as the concrete goes into them, they have water spraying mechanisms within them. So as it's crushing, it's already wetting those materials, so it comes out wet on top of those piles. And so we do share our thoughts, and it's a really big deal to us to make sure that we minimize our impacts to this, and that's why that reuse on the site is also so important. So.
And animal waste has come up several times. I'm over here. So Stock Show has a contract with a recycler of our animal waste, and at midnight, every night of Stock Show, we pile everything to the north end of the yards, and they come in and pick it up, and then they take it out to their recycling plant, and it becomes recycled. So that happens every day of Stock Show. Today, I don't have any animal waste across here because we don't have any animals in here, but during Stock Show we do, just so you know.
There's one more cool thing that I learned at a meeting last week, is that we also do have a mobile refueler on site, which means we have one contractor, which is our horizontal integrated contractor, and they go around with a mobile refueler and refuel equipment, either their generators or other equipment and vehicles and stuff all around the site. That way that we do not have each individual contractor on site having fuel and other materials and such on site. So there's just a lot of kind of cool things that I think that we're trying to do to also minimize that. So.
Sorry, just one quick. So like, I didn't know any of this, so I'm like very thankful to have this education, but I also think it's important maybe to have some sort, like as we're kind of planning for this redevelopment, to have some sort of signage that like tells people what happens to animal waste, what measures you guys are taking, because transparency is key. I just think it would be really informative to tell people about that. A lot of people don't have access to that type of information or just like that knowledge base, myself. So I think that would be cool.
Great idea, thank you.
AE.
Over the years, and to take what you're talking about a little further, over the years there's been some really good conversation in this body about how this entire campus is going to be an educational campus, including how the utility, the regeneration, the use of recycling, how the environment is kept clean. So that's part of the master strategic plan, whatever. And I think that in real time, I can say that I think that sometimes there can be a little bit more information that can be gotten out. But I myself am optimistic that there's going to become a identifying experience of people that are involved in the educational elements of this. It's not just a spot check thing, it's part of the culture of what the National Western Center vision is. And I know that over the years there's also been conversations about making sure that the cement that's being used and recycled is safe. There's a lot of soil testing going on in addition to the dust control. And I appreciate you're here, you're new, and that's good. And as you learn and see going forward, what I really want is to make sure that people also, and you can carry this word, also acknowledge that there has been questions exactly like what you're very perfectly acknowledging at these tables for years and years and years, because we need to have that legacy of activism attached to the constructive conversation that's going on here. Because the National Western Center campus is something to be supported in the way that it is breaking ground on a real organism of best practices and standards that we should be proud of, because there's been a lot of vigilance in this. So as you spread the word, let's keep the sense in mind that the reason that the acquisition, that the procurement is what it is, some of the things that are written into the contracts, if you want to read some really great accountabilities, read some of the contracts and what our utility is responsible for, what the builders. It is a very excellent, in my opinion, from the ones that I've skimmed through, there's some very excellent accountabilities that are formalized in these contracts, and I think that's something that hardly anybody ever gets to see, because who wants to read that stuff? But anyway, I just want to put that perspective on these as it comes up, because one thing I'll say about the NUCO, the builders, the city builders and the standards, I think it's been phenomenal. Not that I know that much, because what have I done before this? Nothing. But I think that there's a really meticulous value system here, and if we can somehow keep it consistent in a way that's advocacy rather than let's continue to be advocates and recognize the depth of the process here, because it is usually not visible, but I want it to be visible so people can appreciate it too, not just for reassurance, because the reassurance is there too. So.
Anyone else?
I have a question on a prior agenda item too. I think we'll have time.
Brad Buchanan.
I just want to sort of add to, I think, some of the themes of all these comments, that some processes that are going right now really, I think, really important parts of the creative process, and specifically to your comment, Mickey, about, what's the experience people have when they come on the campus, like what journey mapping, right? You know, and we were just, Paul and I and some others were in a meeting just today where we were looking at sort of around Betty Cram Drive and National Western Drive South and the buildings that are immediately adjacent to that. And it really was the beginning of the conversation we're going to have around, so what happens if somebody shows up and they have 1 hour? Let's say they're at a CSU event and they're in the CSU Water Resource Building and they've got an hour and they're like, hey, what's this whole National Western thing about? We want to have a really easy thing for them to do. Let's say they want to hear more about the history of the campus. And so how do you hand them a map that says, okay, you want to learn about the history and what was here before and where here's this, and you can take this route around the campus and see these markers or these sort of experiential education devices, and whether it's something you listen to or click on with your phone or Google or whatever, so that you can access these sorts of things, or whether it's art, whether you're saying you want to understand all the art that is on the campus, and there's multiple art programs. There's art programs that'll be on the campus that are part of the NUCO build process. CSU has an art program. The Stock Show has an enormous art collection and art program. All of that being coordinated. So if you're interested in art, you can come to the campus and learn about that. If you're interested in regenerative agriculture, you can learn about that. So all these different sort of journey maps that can help visitors, whether you're somebody that's going to come there a lot, like you're a resident and you're going to be there, we hope, most days, or if you're a one-time visitor and you're never going to be there again, that you can sort of curate that which you are most interested in. So just want to let you know that it's really sort of a fascinating process that we've just started to sort of collect those pieces and parts.
Tim.
Just one last thing to the question about air quality and ground quality. You may wish to have Denver Department of Public Health and Environment come and go through all of the steps that, as AE said, are both within the contracts and the things that they're doing now. DDPHE, by example, has air monitors throughout the quarter on Central 70, coming down Brighton Boulevard and by the schools. They actually have monitors now that in the schools where the nurses and teachers, kids who have asthma or breathing problems walk in, they can see every day a chart that says, this is clean air day, this is bad air day, you should or should not go outside, so it really helps direct for those individuals. And then that also ties in with the water that holds down the dust, because they can test the monitors with the air monitors and make sure that we don't exceed air quality standards. Now, those also are monitoring air quality and directional information about where bad air quality is coming from. So it may be coming from Adams County to the north, and they can actually measure that, know when it is not, and that helps us to work with Denver Regional Council of Governments, Adams County, to be able to start to reduce air quality standard and issues, not standards, but the issues that they've got. And then lastly, there's ongoing ground testing for ground contaminants that continue with every project that we've got. So all of those things are being measured and monitored and then reported back under the contracts.
Anyone else? AE.
Are we done with that?
Are we done with Brad?
I just have
No, Mickey's got a...
Okay. Not done with you,
We're
Brad.
not done with that. I don't want to.
Done with this topic.
Thanks for that reassurance, Karen.
Because I love you.
I think it's important that we just not work to 3 years out or 5 years out. I think we have a stock show coming up in 3 months or 2 months, and I think it's a real opportunity to, one, educate people about what's happening, and two, to make sure that the emphasis is on people. I mean, I think the emphasis is frequently on buildings, on animals, and yet we have the cowboys, we have the people who do all the work around here, we have the history of people and what they did. And somehow that can be showcased now without waiting 3 years. And I think this is a great opportunity as we come into the new stock show to begin to tease people with really the stories about people and the real people there.
That's a good point.
Any other questions for Brad? Okay, AE for something on the agenda. Could you refresh us what your...
Yeah, I just looked for, what do we call the Steve tonight instead of the Mike? I don't know, a little variety. Back on the National Western Center Authority, it just went by real fast, and so I didn't have a chance to read through this. So I have some questions for you, Brad, and I appreciate that you stayed because you have a drive going back and everything. I want to just make sure I understand the process. Because I'm seeing something here that looks a little different, and I may need to be corrected. My understanding from the process over the summer was that I'm getting the impression of that very specific programs are being rolled out in specific areas. I got the impression that the goal for this programmatically was to develop theme areas to take to the authority to establish budgets, that this document was not necessarily going to be an assignment of priorities to programs, but it kind of sounds like that is what is happening. But that there would be more of a I don't want to, the only word I can think of is laissez-faire, but it's not quite the right word, but that it was going to be a little bit less formalized programmatically. But you're talking about very specific priorities that are predominantly the ones you mentioned. You may have just been making an example, so it may not be a priority. The electronic outreach, the YouTube channel, these sorts of things that, those were discussed enthusiastically long before this thing on the summer. Over the summer, there were people interested in that. I'd hope that there wasn't a little dog and pony show here because somebody wanted to keep that as a pro. I really hope that there weren't, because none of those feel localized to the potential of the branding. To me, the branding of the National Western Center has got to be rooted in the sensation that people have as they turn their eyes toward this, that this is in the context of active, vital, residential, working class neighborhoods that are benefiting from the organism of this project. And so I think the easiest thing in the world these days is to create the electronic presence and do media, and I haven't seen the conclusion of the branding discussions with the partners and a whole variety of things. So I want to just get a clear sense of this process. It sounds like you're anticipating that the document is going to be approved without changes at the next advisory board meeting because it's being posted the next day, or is there a document that we can read now? I don't expect it to be public, but it seems like it's kind of public. So can you kind of just take what I've said and fill in a little bit more depth on what's going here?
Sure. So the programming piece of it that you're talking about, and you're right, and I just wasn't getting into the weeds, and maybe I should have more about how it's being formatted. You're right, there are the 4 initiatives, involving the ag economy, the growing young minds, the experience piece, and the culture, or the ag connections piece. And inside those sort of general themes, there are the projects, the 27 sort of programming ideas are thematic placeholders. Those don't represent a specific, none of them represent a specific project. They represent as we talked about, I think a couple of times here, trying to take the ideas that we did hear, the specific ideas we did hear, and the comments we got back that said, here's the kinds of things we'd like to see. And each one of those sort of theme areas, really, there were also projects that were small ideas, and there were bigger ideas, bigger events that would take much longer to put together. So what we're looking to do is try to get some of those areas that we heard so consistently and find folks who want to work on them. So they are placeholders. Each one of those 27 projects is a placeholder. And we're going to begin the discussion, the conversation, to see who's interested in working on them. They are, the majority of them are rooted in this community and of this place. So I do think we're doing what you were at all the meetings. And so if I skipped over some of that, I apologize, because it is very consistent with that. There is no formal approval process for it. We're posting it. We're just posting it all next week after the board meeting is all. So there's no formal approval process or anything. I mean, we feel like, we went through those many meetings and conversations and heard pretty loud and clear, presented in the August series of meetings sort of what we heard and got all those comments, and there was a lot of support for it. So we're just publishing it all now is what's happening, so that we can then start to come up with an approach to actually activate them, start to implement them in 2020.
Okay, I just want to make sure I have an accurate understanding, because the language that was used at the beginning of the process was that the board would approve the process and that there would be 4 thematic areas that then the budget, so to try to develop, to approve a budget, now, it's becoming, I recognize that where the budget comes from may be more complex. Basically, am I understanding correctly that you've selected 27 projects that are going to be implemented under this okay, then can you, just to be sure we're completely clear on what you're saying?
At the August meeting, at each of the 5 August meetings we had, we posted every single project, sort of, and I shouldn't use the word project.
Yeah, I think that's confusing.
They're examples. They are thematic examples, so that folks could sort of get a sense of what it could be and what it would produce. From a budgeting standpoint, we're budgeting for staff that can support and facilitate the creation of those by others. We suspect folks that will come to us with needs in one area versus needs in another. Do they need fundraising help? Do they need us to connect them to other partners, to the partners? Many of those sort of thematic ideas that we heard from stakeholders are ideas that CSU very much is, some of the ideas they're working on already. So it is, I know this is sounding vague, but I think that's the best part of it, is that it allows folks to interpret these sort of voices that we've heard and see themselves in it, and we should be there to support that and fulfill that. Doesn't mean we're not going to be proactive about it and try to reach out and find people. I mean, we are, but it's we haven't figured. I don't have dates for you of when we're going to start doing those pieces and parts. And we were talking about a formal board approval, but at the end of the analysis, we really felt like we had, we've shared it with the board. Board saw it, went, that looks awesome. It almost seemed, this came from stakeholders, so it just almost didn't feel authentic to ask the board to approve it. And so we're not formally approving it.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that the process has redefined itself and shifted a little bit from the beginning. This is not necessary. These things have to be communicated. I haven't heard a full consensus that it's awesome. I appreciate that you've gotten some good feedback. I don't want to generalize. I'm totally comfortable with it being vague. I'm more comfortable with that than thinking that there's selected preferential contractors, et cetera. And I think it's very important in this body for those of us that are here to take the stance of getting these things clarified so that we know, how to invite engagement and how to report out what the process is. I also feel like it's a formidably large document from what I understand, but I think that what I care about is really where are the components of this National Western Center, the partners and the neighborhoods enriching each other. And that's what I'm looking for. So whether or not things are locally, I won't take anybody at their word. I think we have to look at how the implementations are possible, and we have to look at how the outreach and the relationships are to obtain the engagement and the feeling of mutual benefit from the folks in closest proximity to what this is that's unfolding and what these opportunities are. So I just want to state that as the committed challenge that we have in the context of this, and I'd like to more fully understand from the authority office how the budget is developing. It's a little bit of a mystery relative to, and it might be an artifact from my original understanding that there would be 4 thematic areas, program areas, that then the board would, then the budget would be developed, because I did hear that consistently. So I'm totally receptive to making an adjustment in my thinking, but it seemed, it was also kind of a understandable organization of finances. So the answer doesn't have to be here tonight, but I just wanted it acknowledged, and I'd like how funding flows, how people access this, how people that might be interested in the different thematic areas are given, where the level playing field is, and just kind of how that all develops.
Okay, and one clarification that might help, because when you're using the word budget, I'm thinking about the budget, our formal working budget for the National Western Center Authority, and the budgeting for the programming is we're going to source it. I mean, the National Western Center Authority does not have funding to go fund, won't be saying, okay, we're going to pick this and we're going to fund that. If there are projects and partners that need funding assistance that can help, that we can help source for them, that develop, then yes, we'll do that. But this isn't about, we're not going through a budgeting process to say, okay, we're going to take $10,000 and put it towards this project. That's not happening. That hasn't happened and won't happen. We don't have the money to do that, and so that's not happening.
So that I understood. How I had interpreted the use budget was that the 4 thematic areas represented this potential that would probably here's the target for sourcing. Do we want, going eclectically one project to the next is one way to do it. Another is to say, to create the capacity along these 4 thematic areas that synergistically accelerate the mission of this project concordant with what it can do. We target, it is possible to create different sourcing that isn't just project. There are ways to go about this. And so so my understanding, and I'll sit corrected, and I'm just trying to make sure I have an understanding of what the strategies of your offices are. But my understanding is that there might be sure would be great if we could figure out X, 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 and X as goals. And now it doesn't have to be that way. I just want to make sure I know what's being said. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm just asking for the clarification. That's all.
Any other comments, questions? I'm not going to jump into it. I was about to say, years ago, we did have this conversation about themes.
A little loud.
Years ago, we did have this conversation about themes, and that was prior to the authority being stood up. So I'm going to ask SAC to look for that information. A couple of years ago, before the authority board stood up, that's where we had the conversation about the 4 programmatic areas. And so I'm going to ask SAC to see if we can find that information.
I'm not at all concerned about the 4 categories. I'm just wanting the mechanisms of as it's emerging to be. I'm not challenging that at all.
Oh, I didn't think you were. I was just wanted to find the information in case you wanted the information.
I think it's always good to put some history out, and I don't know that this was limited to those, to those 4. But, it's kind of evolved. Yeah.
Capiche, got you. Does anyone else have anything they want to get off their chest before we adjourn?
Any news that we should know about?
Yes. Well, you have the Global Landing Park here. It's on here.
Oh,
Global Landing Park.
oh, I think that was a old agenda, or what was
Well,
that?
that's the agenda I have. And,
That person, is that the person who pulled out?
No,
the
you're
agenda?
talking about the update.
yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It's on the
And,
update.
I have some
Tim's
real
here.
concern. I know it's not necessarily a national Western issue. There's enough on your plate. But I think certainly it is a critical issue
Tim's here.
for the community. And I'm pleased that at least there was an attempt to put the park back. But if you look at the early pictures of the history when the shoemakers were here and what was going on at the river, and it was full of trees and green and really it felt like a place. Now looks more like, a little bit like a playground and a little bit like every other park along the river. And I think that, they're talking about green cover and downtown. The number of trees and the quality of the trees really leaves an enormous amount lacking. And I don't know to what extent we have any influence, but it seems to me this is a park which really adjoins the National Western. And I would like everybody to be able to see the pictures of the before and the after. I think the archives in the city have the shoemaker story and pictures of that park. And not going back that far, but going back just maybe 10 years ago. And I think we owe it to ourselves to really make that a green park. And I'm not sure why we can't get more than a 2-inch caliber tree in this park that had probably 200 trees which were 12-inch caliber or 8-inch caliber. But I ask everybody to take a look at how bleak that park looks and see what we can do to really bring it back to its history. That's the place where Shoemaker landed. It's his landing. It's basically where the history of the river really started, and I think we owe it more in terms of making it green and a pleasant place than the stick trees that are there. I urge all of you to go by there and take a look at what is now Global Landing Park.
So, Mickey, a couple things. The park itself is under what we call substantial completion. That means that you have access to it, the bike paths, all those sorts of things. Like Brighton Boulevard, probably the best example. Remember, we were at substantial completion. Then we added more vegetation and other things in the next phase to actually get there. That's anticipated still through really the spring of next year. Now, we had an original ribbon cutting planned, but decided to postpone it until we can get into the spring and do more of the work for the kinds of things that you see there. I think that there is going to be a difference between what the architectural designs were and what people had visualized and the start of trees that are going to grow into the kind of vegetation that you're looking for. I think you're looking at something that will in the future be able to get to something that you're talking about, and I think it'll be, again, more vegetation is going to be added, but I wouldn't expect it to be exactly like architectural drawings, because they themselves generally are a little bit more flourishing than what you see when you first build.
Well, I'm only urging the city or whoever's responsible to basically look at its history and perhaps think about a larger caliber tree and looking at some green coverage in the history of that park.
Yeah, fair enough, and we should have some of that added into the spring, and we'll look at that.
Any other comments, announcements before we close out? Seeing none, we're adjourned. See you next month. Drive safely.
Yeah, how bad is that?
I-70 is closed at the Eisenhower Terminal as well.
Yes, sir. Hey, honey, how are you?
Good. How was
We need to
the
get together and have a cup of coffee.
I'm traveling a lot.
I know, I see that you're doing.
I am.
You're going to Lex tomorrow, baby.
Tomorrow, and then in Cabo Sunday for a week. I'm doing the Spanish immersion course.
Oh, great.
And then I'm home for a week, and I'm going to Florida for a week. And then I'm home for a month, and then
So I'm
yeah.
gone all next week because I'm going to San Francisco. But,
I'm here the week of November 4th through the 8th.
so let's go figure something out.
Oh, I would love
Gonna
to.
email?
I will.
Okay. All right, babe.
Bye.
Okay, she's talking about